In 2013, game developer Naughty Dog released a zombie apocalypse-styled third-person action-adventure game called The Last of Us. In the game, you play as Joel, whose daughter Sarah is killed in 2013 at the beginning of a mutated fungal outbreak called the cordyceps brain infection, or cordyceps/CBI for short, that tear their world apart. After losing his daughter to a gunshot wound from military forces, the main character Joel gets swept up in smuggling across the country a young girl named Ellie, who turns out to be immune to the zombies, known as infected. This is 20 years after the infection initially started, and there is hope that something inside Ellie can create a cure for the infection. In the game, players help Ellie and Joel fight their way from Boston to Salt Lake City to see if this is true. In The Last of Us Part 2, the aptly named second installment in the series released in 2020, players get to see from Ellie's perspective as she is hellbent on revenge for the death of Joel, and players also get to see the events from the perspective of the character Abby, the one who killed him. Because the beginning of this outbreak takes place in 2013, there are many things that are different in Joel and Ellie's world than in ours. There is little to no food, electricity, or running water, except in places that have either been taken over by the military response, FEDRA, which stands for Federal Disaster Response Agency, or the rebel factions, the Fireflies. Kids that were born after the outbreak have no frame of reference for what the before times looked like, except in books, or if, like Ellie, they find someone's diary. The bulk of the games and subsequently the HBO show take place in a fictional time near our own, from 2023 to 2029-ish for the show, and 2033 to 2039 for both games. We do not get to see firsthand exactly how these changes to their world happened. Instead, we get snippets through items known as artifacts found in the game and in visual clues as well as flashbacks in the show. So how did this worldwide apocalyptic epidemic affect queer people? Hi, I'm Melody, and here on my channel I talk about queerness, music, movies, and queer musical movies. So if that sounds fun to you, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below and let's get into it. The queer moments in the first installment of The Last of Us games are few and far between. As The Last of Us's first game was released only 2 years before the US, where the games are set, legalized gay marriage, this is not wholly surprising. We get one example in the first game of a possibly queer relationship through the characters of Bill and Frank. In the game, Bill and Frank's relationship is merely alluded to. Bill, a cantankerous friend of Joel's, helps Joel and Ellie out by guiding them to a working vehicle. Joel and Bill have a chat wherein Bill chastises Joel for having acquired a partner or someone he is close to in Ellie. Bill reveals that he too had a partner and that it brought him only trouble.
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. A partner. Somebody I had to look after. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing: get you killed.
The two men then discover the body of Bill's said partner, Frank, who has hung himself due to being bitten and possibly infected. Bill's teary-eyed reaction suggests that there is more to the title of partner than Bill originally let on. There is also a note that players can find that lends more to the story. Frank writes in this note that he is tired of Bill and that he is, quote, too stuck in his ways. If the player gives the note to Bill, a conversation ensues in which one can hear even more sadness in Bill's voice.
That's how you feel. You too, right? Fucking idiot. You ready to go?
This inference of Bill's gayness is mostly due to the incredible voice acting from W. Earl Brown. This is because, as the game creator Neil Druckmann confessed, he wasn't thinking about representation when he created the character of Bill, and that Frank was conceived as a best friend. It was the voice actor for Bill, W. Earl Brown, who infused queerness into the character post-script, after Druckmann allowed him to define the relationship at a table read. Ellie will also show Joel a magazine that solidifies Bill as being gay, that she found in Bill's hideout, and it can also be seen by the player when looking around. Since the game was originally released when it was, it makes sense that this is only an allusion to gayness. It is the only queer relationship hinted at in the game, and left much to be desired. Lucky for us, we now have the HBO show. In the show, Bill and Frank, played by Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett respectively, have an entire dedicated episode called Long, Long Time. In this episode, we get to see how Bill and Frank meet, fall in love, and eventually die. Bill in the show is a much more fleshed out character, and as such, we get a hell of a lot more character progression through him. He meets Frank when Frank sneaks onto Bill's property, which can only be described as a compound, trying to find food. Frank ends up in a trap hole and is cornered by Bill, who eventually decides to feed him a lavish dinner with wine included. Even though Bill seems to be a typical masculine prepper type, we get to see his more tender side expressed to Frank, which was so expertly and subtly played by W. Earl Brown in the game. In the end, as we learned through a note that Joel and Ellie found, the two men ended their lives after growing old and being happy together for around 20 years. This is such a stark opposition to the normal bury your gays trope that Hollywood has loved to use in the past. By showing us Bill and Frank's happy, long relationship, The Last of Us shows that joy and hope can be found by queer folks, even in a zombie apocalypse. The first game installment also has a DLC called Left Behind. No, not that Left Behind, in which players get to see through Ellie's eyes what happened right after Joel was injured by falling on a piece of rebar during the first game. This is interspersed with flashbacks of Ellie and her friend, Riley, as they sneak out to an abandoned mall a few weeks before Ellie and Joel meet. During this time, Ellie is a soldier in training at a Fedra facility, and Riley has recently left the Fedra school to join the Fireflies. Riley reveals that she is training under Marlene, the character that recruits Joel to transport Ellie in the first game, and that she is going to be leaving Boston soon on a mission for the Fireflies. This is Riley's last chance to spend some quality time with Ellie, who is understandably upset about Riley leaving her in the first place, as she didn't even tell her she was leaving. Ellie thought she was dead, and while she is very happy to see Riley again, there is tension between the two. This tension is seen while the girls are exploring the mall, but we also get to see the depths of their love for each other. And yes, they do kiss. This romance is unfortunately cut short, not only by the fact that Riley is leaving town, but also by infected that show up at the mall. The girls fight off the infected as long as they can, but they ultimately both get bit. This is when Ellie realizes she is immune. Riley, unfortunately, is not. Left Behind was hailed for its story and for centering a queer teen romance, which was groundbreaking at the time for mainstream video games. Ashley Johnson, who portrays Ellie in The Last of Us games, said, "Seeing those glimpses of Ellie getting to be a kid and being carefree, and those first moments of having a crush on someone, being next to someone and thinking, oh my god, I want to kiss them so bad. Her and Riley getting that beautiful moment in this really harsh world. That's a wonderful thing." This episode in the game and show is actually based on a prequel comic series by the original game writer Druckmann and artist Faith Erin Hicks. While the pair did not originally set out for Ellie and Riley to fall in love, we can see that Ellie clearly looks up to Riley and admires her fearlessness. At this point in the story, Ellie is not quite sure of herself or where she wants to go. Does she want to stay with Fedra or leave and join the Fireflies like Riley did? She worries about getting caught while they are out way more than Riley does, and Riley is very much the leader in their relationship. The budding romance is very much portrayed as fresh and appropriate for two young teens. Storm Reed, who portrayed Riley in the HBO show, said of the portrayal of the kiss, "I do think Riley saw it coming a little bit. Despite her feelings and her inkling of, like, Ellie might like me a little bit, she maybe didn't think Ellie would have the balls to kiss her, so I think that's the surprise." Reed goes on to say, "I think it's beautiful that we ended where it ends and we don't have to see what happened to Riley. That scene is essential to bring us back to what the world of the show is and bring us back to understanding that this is beautiful and they are experiencing love and they are experiencing joy, but we are living in times where your time is cut short." This feeling of everything being cut short is extended into the second game, The Last of Us Part 2, and the second season of the HBO show. In this part of the story, we follow Ellie, who is now fully integrated into the seemingly safe society that resides in Jackson, Montana. As is shown at the end of the first game and season, Joel and Ellie have returned to Jackson, where Joel's brother Tommy and his wife Maria preside over a safe haven of sorts. The town is fortified by walls and snipers and a host of other safety measures that protect the town's citizens from infected. The citizens have also formed an almost fully fledged community complete with farms, stores, and community events. They even even have their own form of government that acts as a voting body to decide what citizens can or cannot do. We see this voting happen in the show when Ellie, who has witnessed the death of Joel at the hands of an unknown rebel group, wants to avenge his death by chasing after the group. The governing body votes no to the idea of sending people along with Ellie, but Ellie and her friend Dina decide to sneak out anyway and head to Seattle, where the members of the rebel group, called WLF, is supposed to be hiding out. Ellie and Dina sneak out with the help of a man who Ellie thought would never help them, the character Seth, who reacted with bigotry after seeing Ellie and Dina kissing while inebriated at a New Year's Eve party a little while before Joel's death. This is the first instance of such bigotry that we see in the world of The Last of Us. Obviously, this world is a little bit of a fantasy because the timeline of the real world split after the onset of the cordyceps infection in 2013 or 2003 in the show. So why do things seem so less bigoted in The Last of Us? Well, despite the obvious fact that it is a fictional game/show, it is just like most art, a mirror and also an idea of what could be. In the story, since it is set in the US, the writers have held up a mirror showing our political world here, showing the polarity of the two-party system that exists. As such, the world of The Last of Us also has two major political sides being represented. First, there is the militaristic arm of the government called Fedra. They turn more authoritarian over time in the story, eventually encroaching more and more on citizens' rights. In the first game, in the part where Joel and his smuggling partner Tess are trying to find Robert, a fellow smuggler who wronged them, players can witness Fedra soldiers interrogating citizens. Fedra soldiers are scanning citizens to see if they have been infected. This scene culminates with one person being shot and killed. In the show, in episode 4 of the second season, we get to see things from the perspective of some Fedra soldiers. One soldier questions why the citizens are referred to as voters. Their commander says it was because they, Fedra, took the citizens' rights to vote away, something the political right in the US is wont to do. Secondly, we have the Fireflies and the WLF. Both the Fireflies and the WLF are called rebel factions that arose to fight against increasing authoritarianism by Fedra. The Fireflies are the ones that will develop a cure from Ellie and are thought to be the good guys. However, things in the world of The Last of Us aren't that simple, and we eventually learn that the Fireflies and WLF are on the opposite side of the same coin as Fedra. We also have another party being represented, although it's not as strong politically as the first three. This is the Regular Citizen Party and is represented throughout the games and show by characters like Ellie and Joel, Tess, Dina, Sam and Henry, Bill and Frank, and the residents of the town of Jackson, Montana. Regular citizens have created their own political bodies and sense of morality based on what will keep them safe. In Jackson, we see that while things are a little more left-leaning than our current political climate in the US, this is to keep the town safe. For example, the residents are not happy when Seth displays his bigotry toward Ellie and Dina at the New Year's party, which Joel pushes Seth, and Seth also made comments that this is a family event. Maria eventually steps in to mediate the issue in her role as de facto mayor, and Seth apologizes for his bigoted comments later on. There are also undoubtedly religious people still alive after the cordyceps infection took hold. We see in the game that Dina and her family is Jewish. We get to explore a synagogue and learn a little bit more about Dina's backstory. In addition to meeting the WLF in Seattle, we also meet the Seraphites in the second part of the Last of Us story. In the US, a lot of the conflict with the queer community comes from certain religious groups. Similarly, in the story of The Last of Us, there is at least one religious group that causes conflict. The Seraphites, or Scars, known as such because of the ritualistic scarring they make on their cheeks. In the game, during Abby's part of the story, we get to know a little bit more about this religious group and how they operate. Abby gets rescued from certain gruesome death by a teen sibling pair named Lev and Yara. Abby then turns around and saves Yara from dying due to having her arm bashed in for being a quote-unquote apostate. We later learn that this happened because Yara's brother Lev is actually trans.
How much did he tell you?
Not much. I heard some of your people calling him Willie.
For a long time, I didn't understand why he was questioning the laws, traditions, When he explained to me how he felt inside, I told him he had to keep it to himself. I was hoping he'd snap out of it. He seemed fine for a while. But then he shaved his head. Like one of the men. It was suicide.
Is that when you ran?
First I screamed at him. I hit him. It was so stupid.
Lev was due to be married off as a young wife to a much older man and ran away due to that and because he is trans and could not safely live as a Seraphite anymore. In the United States, conservative Christian groups have fought against progressive queer policies since at least the 1960s, when tensions rose after the Stonewall riots and other such incidents, when queer folks asked for simple things like equal housing and employment rights. This has often been fought against under the guise of protecting the children. In a world like in The Last of Us, where children are rare due to the immediate threat of the cordyceps and the fact that having young children would only slow someone down and take more resources. Although there are kids, people don't seem too concerned with making sure they don't grow up to be gay. They are definitely more concerned that the children survive and can grow to help protect everyone else, like in the Fedra and rebel camps and even the Seraphites, where kids are trained young to defend themselves. In a society like Jackson, kids are seen as a precious part of the community and even attend a school. But they are still expected to help out with maintaining the society they are a part of. If this cordyceps infection were to happen in real life, some Christian groups would no doubt take advantage of the situation to promote more hate against queer folk than such groups do in The Last of Us. After all, birthing more children might be more important to some groups, as they would definitely want more soldiers to fight against opposing groups and infected. So how might queer people be treated in real life if an epidemic like this did break out? Well, as we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the United States, tensions run high during a worldwide event like this. The whole world feels unstable and full of chaos. Oftentimes, people will cling to traditional values during times of crisis to feel a bit of stability. In regards to the COVID pandemic, research was conducted by psychologists Daniel Rosenfeld and A. Janet Tomiyama in 2021. In the paper, which will be linked in the description below, they stated, as individuals experience everyday life during a time of societal turmoil and pathogen threat, their psychological defense mechanisms and motivational systems may have been put on guard, informing the way they felt about social, moral, and political matters. They continued, in essence, uncertainty can promote conservatism by motivating a need for structure, a desire to preserve the status quo, and resistance to social change. This effect is observed historically in the United States presidential elections, throughout which times of greater societal threat to the established order have predicted increases in preferences for political conservatism. Additionally, the study goes on to say that experiencing pathogen threats like a viral pandemic or cordyceps brain infection epidemic can influence moral and political psychology through a behavioral immune system. Research on the behavioral immune system suggests that elevated disease risk can make individuals more socially conservative by reconfiguring their sense of morality to prioritize disease avoidance. Basically, in order to create stability where there is none, humans will both socially and biologically use conservatism to protect themselves from a perceived threat. This, combined with already rising tensions, would lend to a world unlike The Last of Us, one possibly more bigoted towards queer people, not less. In the real world in 2003 and 2013, the US was indeed in a period of conservatism. In 2003, the US was dealing with the aftermath of 9/11 and the war in Iraq, which created a more patriotic and right-leaning political environment. In 2013, after a period of relative progressiveness under the Obama administration, there were also rising tensions in the Middle East, as well as rising tensions online. The increase in use of platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube gave a voice to people that were dissenters of the Obama administration, right-wing extremists. Despite, or in fact because of, progress like gay marriage being legalized in 2015, these dissenters had had enough of being told to not be bigoted and elected Donald Trump to his first term in 2016. As we see in Season 2, Episode 4 of the HBO show, residents that are younger do not necessarily know of a world that was bigoted towards queer folks. They're not necessarily aware of a world where sexuality even mattered more than basic day-to-day survival, and as such, their attitudes reflect this reality. When Ellie and Dina are exploring Seattle, they do not know what pride is or what all the rainbows seen around town are for. There's also an optional dialogue with Dina in the game about queer books, but Ellie brushes this off and just says they need to look for more supplies. This has been debated online of whether or not Ellie really knows what pride is or what the rainbows are all about, and if she's just deflecting because she's not sure of Dina's feelings for her yet, but nobody really knows for sure. In this episode of the show, we also get the gayest scene of the story. When Dina and Ellie confess their feelings for each other, the two also make love. Dina comes out as bi and implies her mother was not accepting of this. We learned earlier in the story that Dina and her family lived in an isolated cabin for the beginning of the outbreak, and that Dina later traveled to Jackson, where the society was more inclusive due to the amount of people. In episode 6 of the HBO show, Joel finds Ellie in her room with another girl. In this scene, Joel gets upset with Ellie not just because she is obviously queer, but also for doing drugs and getting a tattoo, and generally just being a rebellious teen. Joel comes off as a little bit homophobic, probably due to just having a hard time adjusting to Ellie growing up, and because of the time period he grew up in and how he was treated by his own father. However, as we see in later scenes in the timeline, Joel becomes fully accepting and supportive of Ellie, even telling her that Dina would be lucky to have her. Because of this accepting and loving climate that Joel and the Jackson community at large have created, Dina and Ellie can have a bit of joy in their queerness, just like Bill and Frank did before them, even amid such chaos. However, as one would expect in a world where everyone can just die at any time, the majority of the characters do have some sort of PTSD. Joel from the death of his daughter Sarah and partner Tess, and from almost losing Ellie, and probably from all of the killing that he's done too. Ellie from Joel's death and all she did to avenge him. Tommy also from Joel's death and probably, like Joel, from living through the start of the epidemic. Dina from Jesse's death and all the shit that she went through with helping Ellie avenge Joel's death, and Abby from her father's death, the deaths of all of her friends at the hands of Tommy and Dina and Ellie, and being captured and tortured by the Rattlers in California. The thing that Neil Druckmann and the writers do well, though, is that the trauma is not the root of the character's queerness, as is shown in many other queer tropes in media. The queerness is just another part of them, like having red hair, and is not a pivotal part of the story. It's not a cause of much conflict or a reason at all that the things in the story happen, aside from the reason why Dina goes along with Ellie to avenge Joel. My point is, it's refreshing to see someone's queerness just be a part of them as a character, and not a catalyst for any major events in the story. The only real exception to this is Lev, and how his transness is a driving force for Abby to protect him, even if it is slightly inadvertently. I'd say it's more like Abby wants to protect Lev because his transness lost him his family and his people, much like Abby's thirst for revenge for her father lost her friends, and the WLF. All of the characters in The Last of Us are also not meant to be perfect, and that makes them so much better. That they can be queer and imperfect makes them seem more real. Overall, I think the show and the games do a great job showing how queerness would be the least of most people's concerns during such a crazy time. When people are dying or turning into zombies left and right, why does it matter who someone wants to love? And that is the main point of the story of The Last of Us: love. It's Bill's love for Frank in the show that allows him to enjoy his last years as much as he can, and to let go enough to help Joel and Ellie in the game. It's Dina's love for both Joel and Ellie that allow her to help Ellie seek revenge for Joel's death. We even get a very bittersweet queer moment when Ellie plays an acoustic rendition of Take On Me by Aha, which Joel must have taught her. Dina gets very teary-eyed, and in the game, she tells Ellie that she should have kissed her a long time ago. Dina is also obviously upset by Joel's death, and seeing his talents being passed on to Ellie that he should have been able to show to more people makes her feel like them seeking revenge for his death is indeed justified. While the end of The Last of Us is a little bit ambiguous as to what Dina and Ellie's relationship is, a lot of people have pointed out that in the last scenes, you can see Ellie wearing Dina's bracelet, whereas she was not wearing it before. So this gives a lot of people hope that Ellie and Dina are, in fact, still together. But I guess we will all have to wait and see until Game 3. On the other side, it is Abby's love for her father and her friends that makes her and her friends want to kill Joel in the first place. And it's Ellie's love for Joel that sends her on that path of revenge in the second game/season. And finally, it's Joel's love for Ellie that allows him to do what he did and rescue Ellie from dying at the hands of the Fireflies' doctors, despite the world possibly gaining a cure for the infection. In the DLC Left Behind, Riley so eloquently wraps it up like this: "But we fight for every second we get to spend with each other, whether it's 2 minutes
or 2 days. We don't give that up. I don't want to give that up."
In The Last of Us world, just as in the real one, the most precious resource that we have is time. Time with those that we love and care for. We never know how long it will last, so we need to make it good.